Good evening. How's everybody? Y'all don't seem to be as excited as I am. What's wrong with y'all?
Sam, come here.
Y'all look like y'all might have worked at school today.
Come on. Go. And now I don't have a pen. Oh,
Well, somebody tell us a story to get us started tonight. Is anybody happy, sad, mad? Anybody had a good day, bad day?
All right, in their defense, it's been a couple of weeks. It's been a couple of weeks. They got out of the groove.
Now they're not in the LS mode. They're back in the CNI mode, set and get mode.
They're out of the groove.
I know.
We'll have to bring them back.
I know. We'll have to tell them. So I'll start out with my story of the day. And it led to something really bad. So this morning early, my wife and I were upstairs, and all of a sudden the doorbell, ding dong, ding dong. We thought it was a kid. We come downstairs, and it's the gas company. And they said, we're going to replace your meter today. It's not code. Didn't call, didn't email, tore all the shrubbery off the side of the house, had a backhoe, destroyed my mulch bed in my azalea garden, and then had to get in the attic with them had to go to all the gas appliances and check for leaks. And so I ended up having to got in the attic with all the insulation. I had to take another bath today. I swear I've had to take 2 baths today. It's not even Saturday. And so it's about as bad a day as you can get when you have to have 2 baths. But yeah, so they were here all day.
They had to bring the forklift to get you out of the tub, didn't they?
They did. That's the truth. Might give me one of them where you lay down and roll in it, get out. That one of them that's got the side that lets out. I might have to get me one of them. Sure enough. All right. Is it 6 o'clock? It's 6 o'clock. It's time to start. Welcome back to Mels 603. Appreciate you being with us tonight. I hope you had some time over the break to read the case studies and all the activities, because I want to make sure I hit those tonight, and we'll kind of follow up on the things we might have missed last time. And again, I expect you to participate. This is not set and get, so we'll just dive right in. First thing I want to do is share my screen and look at our weekly schedule to make sure everybody's on board with that. And so for the next 3 Tuesdays after this one, we'll be meeting from 6 to 8. The Zoom links are here. We'll cover all the different ones. Your OMA task 1 is due this week. I'm going to talk about it more just in a minute. And then our last weekend will be November 12th and 13th. Just as a heads up, I have invited Dr. Bull. I don't know which day he will show up, but I'm quite sure he will. I never pass up a meal. He never passes up an opportunity to come and speak to a group. And we're similar in that way. But what I want him to address, and I told him about 30 minutes, I'd like for him to address the dissertation process, the changes that have been made since you folks enrolled, the page limits, the final review by him, those kinds of things. If you have any questions, this is your opportunity. Hopefully he'll come. If you have any of those. My intention is not to stir any trouble or cause any problems, but to get you back in the mode. You had to step away from EDCI in your dissertation this semester. The whole point is I want to ramp you. You'll be done with us that Sunday after we'll spend the Sunday with TD Jakes, and it'll be a great day. But after that, you got to switch back to the EDCI mode, back to dissertation. And so I've asked him in to answer any questions you have, give you a little pep talk, make sure that you know that we're all going to be supporting you when you go back, that just because you're no longer with me and Steve, we'll still be here to support you in any way that we can. And as I know the EDCI folks will be. So that there's not an issue, there's not problems. It's just kind of a pep talk. If you have questions, if you have issues, that would be your opportunity to talk to the dean about those at that time. And if you don't feel comfortable, you can tell me, and I'll ask anybody anything. That's what that's for. So that's our schedule. Now that Saturday, November the 12th, you'll be presenting all day. Your teams will be presenting your 4 case studies. We may rotate them around, but again, Steve and I talked yesterday. We're trying to get you as much experience as we can in front of the group, leading a group, commanding a room. That is seminal if you want to be a school administrator. If you want, and even if you just want to work in curriculum, you still got to be able to command the room. So these presentations we feel are good. So you will have a PowerPoint for each of the 4, a group PowerPoint for each of the 4 case studies. I want to be clear on this. It's a group PowerPoint. It's a collaborative project. You'll get up and do that. And then you will write a half-page reflection of how the process worked, what you learned, if your team worked well. And that's just private. That goes in a Dropbox private to share with me. So you'll have 2 things due for each case study. One is your group presentation, and everybody has to upload it. It can't just be the team leader for that one. Everybody on the team has to upload it in the Dropbox to get your points. And then you will do a private one to me, just a half-page or less, that summarizes what you learned, didn't learn, what you should have learned, how the process worked or didn't. So that's what will be due for those. All right, so as I said, OMA Task 1 is due this week by Sunday. Needs to be in there by this Sunday. So let's look at that again briefly. The candidate will research and develop analysis of school context, internal and external, district, state, and federal levels to include demographic and regarding students and staff, places information with state national context. All right, so what that means is state report card. That's your internal context. That's got to be in task 1. I've had a couple so far that had a lot of stuff that was good, but it wasn't to the point. Please remember, under OMA task and prompts, I have the master scheduling PowerPoint that says these are the things that I expect to see. Number 1, report card. Now, again, you don't have to agree with me or school administration, but the biggest or most important representation of your school is the data on the state report card. It's why we keep score. It is objective truth. You are your record. You are whatever your state report card says you are. You better know what that is. How can you schedule a school if you don't know how you're doing? What needs to be given. So again, these are the things that I need to see reflected in task 1, your report card, all the data from your report card, your EVOS school report, your school improvement plan, includes your master schedule, duty roster, supervision schedule, teacher working condition survey. You will need that. And then your latest accreditation report. And that's for your external context, remember? And then you will need to additionally speak to a school administrator about what part process or part does the school improvement team play in developing the budget. It specifically asks you that. So let's go back to that one. The contextual analysis clearly describes the school budgeting process and procedures. Within this description, participation of school personnel and the school improvement team is delineated. That means you tell us how much they have to do with it. The notion here is that schools that don't involve their school improvement team in the budgeting process rarely budget to support the school improvement plan. They either divide it up and give everybody equal amounts, or the principal decides what he or she thinks priorities are. And one of the case studies that we did in Steve's half of the course, one of the things that we talked about is you have all these people coming to you wanting things. How do you decide who gets what? And without somebody shooting you, is that it goes to the school improvement team, and it's a group consensus decision about what the priorities are in your school. Just like when you did the app sale for Steve first half of the course, and 4 of you still need to get those in, by the way, as he reminded me yesterday. You had to identify your pressing academic need. I would expect you to see that being scheduled for and budgeted for. in your school budget and your school master schedule, whatever that most pressing need that you had to identify was from your standardized test scores. So that's the notion here. Task 2, as we talked about last time, you have to develop a school-wide professional development plan that addresses an academic issue. These are things you've done before. There's a PowerPoint in here on how to do that. Make sure if you don't know how to do that, but summarize it in some way. You can use the graphic organizer that you summarize your action plan in your app cell. That's the best one to summarize your professional growth plan. If you don't remember what that looks like, we'll pull it up right quick. This one, the full one right here. What activity are you going to have your teachers doing for professional development, the timeline, when you're going to do it, who's going to teach it, what resources you need, both money and people, how are you going to assess whether they're doing it or not. The formative assessment is whether they're actually doing what you ask them to do or not. Summative assessment is going to be some sort of student measurement of student growth or achievement. Your goal, I have people who ask me what's the difference between a goal and an indicator of success. Let's say our reading scores are at 60 and we want them to be at 85. Our goal is 85% on grade level. But we don't expect to go from 60 to 85 in 1 year. That'd be 5 standard deviations. That'd just be cheap. So an indicator of success might be to go from 60 to 65 and make 1 standard deviation. That's how that works. For whatever area that you've identified academically that you're trying to improve with this professional growth plan. So that is the bridge between what you did first half of the semester and what you do the second half of the semester. We have to make sure that we understand that. So make sure that in task 2, you summarize your growth plan so that we'll know exactly who's going to do what, where, and when. All right, and then task 3, of course, you will build a new schedule. And as I told you, I don't mind if you do, elementaries, you should do the whole thing. Middle school, high school, you might just want to do a department. You could do the whole thing if you want to, but something that you've learned that you think that you could improve, modify your existing schedule, either build a new one if you're in an elementary, or give me a modified department or one for the whole school, for middle or high school. And then you write your competencies. All right, I am going to pause and catch my breath. And we're going to go back and look at that again. And so you can see when these are all due. So this Sunday at 9 o'clock, you need to have your task 1 in. Next Sunday, next Sunday, next Sunday. And then by the time that we roll around to here, you should have it in there. Let's see.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
For the group work that we're supposed to submit, we were supposed to send in our Zoom links for that. Where do I send that?
All right, you can put that in the discussion board where it says your information. So let me show you that. And so let me make sure, not for my edification, but for yours. Let me get that out of the way. This is the groups that I have. Is this correct? I have these posted in our shell. Group 1 is Sarah, Michelle, Alina, Annie, Stephanie, Melissa, Shantae, Sarah, Natalie, Mandy, and then Valine, Jessica, LaCrista, and Lisa. That's what I have. And if you need to put a Zoom link in to call for your meeting, just simply go to discussion board. And I have these put where you can do as many, you can add to threads, put your contact or your Zoom information group right here, just create a thread and go in and upload it right there. Is that what you needed to know, Valine?
Yes.
That's where it would go, because everybody's got their contact information there. Everybody can access everybody's information, and you can put the Zoom link information if you are sharing that particular case study and you're calling the Zoom meeting to collaborate. This is where you would put that.
Okay.
All right.
You.
Thank you. Were you able to upload your OMA today?
No, and I tried just now, and it still says it need the evaluator hasn't unlocked
I
it
do
yet.
not know why that is not working for you. But I will get it figured out.
Okay.
So,
Let's see.
Dr. Lamb, I have a question
Yes,
about task 3. So, okay, so I'm at a high school, so you said I could do the department.
that you're in, that is correct.
Okay, so there's only about 7 teachers. And I just need to look closer. What honestly, let me look at the let me read it, and then we'll be back in class next week.
We will be,
So I think I need time to just read it.
yeah.
Dr. Lamb, I have a question about task 4.
Okay,
So we are supposed to do all 21 competency, or we don't have to since we did some for the APSL?
you do the ones that you did 13 for the app, so you do the other 9.
Okay,
That is correct. And so let's see. So Sarah Sellers has already uploaded her OMA and she didn't have any problem. So and everybody's was able to upload their app. So I can't figure out, Beline, why when you uploaded the app cell, it's the same DRF as you can see right here. I can't figure out why it's not working for you. It doesn't seem to be a task stream problem because everybody's been able to upload everything so far. And we've
Yeah,
even had an OMA. And I went back in and checked last night and re-enrolled everybody. I can't figure out why yours is telling you that. But you and I will work after class tonight. We'll see if we can figure it out. We'll have you share your
Okay.
screen by then.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let me get out of that. All right, so back to Jessica. If you've only got 7 people in your department, you might want to do maybe another department. You know, be something like that. I mean, scheduling a whole high school would be an ordeal. But you need to do enough that you begin, you know, that you can sit down and say, all right, what's the federal law that affects this department? We got to make sure that we're following all those things. And what is the state law and local board policy? You got to work through your rationale to make sure that, you know, that it simulates the kind of experience that you would have if you were looking to do a complete master schedule. We want you to get that experience. That's the notion here. This is, again, it's about you and your learning and what you take away from this. So make sure that it's broad enough that you get all those experiences. You know, you'd like to touch something that has some federal requirements about it. It doesn't have to be the EC department, but you'd like to touch something that's got some federal requirements. You're going to hit the state requirements on length of class and highly qualified teacher certification and who teaches what. You know, that's EVOS as well. But the federal one is the one I want to make sure that you have to accommodate federal law in this, and that would work well for you. Okay.
All right. Well,
But
okay.
we can talk more. We can talk more next week, or we can talk whenever you want to. Just let me know. All right. All right. Did y'all have a chance to read the case studies? Now you're going to have to do a full presentation on these. What my intent tonight with the case studies. We'll do the activities in a few minutes here. I want to move to the case studies. What I want to do with the case studies, the first one is will cheating strike Bobby out. I'm going to go through these and I'm going to hit some big ideas with you here. That is the notion. And so under case study materials, I've got some things for you here. Some reference areas. And what I don't have in yours is I don't have federal zero tolerance, but what I do have is under our first Saturday, or no, excuse me, our first Sunday. Let's see, do I have it there? Standard 6, EBOS, principal evaluation. Let's see. No. Here we go. Under Tuesday Zoom, August 25th, the Zoom session, I've got this manual for you, and this is the Bible on disciplinary data reporting, and we will cover it that night. But when you're working, I'm just, again, these aren't due till the end, till November, but just I'm giving you some pointers here, some clues. This manual contains language for the state and federal regulations on zero tolerance expulsions. That would be some good reading for you to do. So, and here it is on page 6. Right here it is. So I'm going to stop my share and talk for a minute here. In 2014, the state of North Carolina started collecting the data through Power School for the Office of Civil Rights Reporting. You have to report, and we'll talk about this later, but you have to report acts of crime and violence. You have to report suspensions. You have to, all the demographics, everything that happens in your building, you have to report all incidents. We collect data in Power School by incident, not by outcome. What does that mean? Well, it means that if an incident occurs at your school and there's a written referral, it goes in Power School, period. There is no major, there is no minor, there is no, well, I didn't suspend that kid, so I don't have to tell anybody. No, we've talked about that before. If Sarah shot me, Sarah Seller, she looks like she might tote a gun or carry a knife. If she were to shoot me and leave town and we didn't catch and punish her, would that mean that I wasn't shot? No. We report incidents, not outcomes. And the reason why is because we collect data for OCR, who tracks all of our data now. But they also track, we'll talk about that more later, but what they also track is zero tolerance expulsions. A zero tolerance expulsion is illegal. You say, but they want us to report them. Yeah, you have to tell on yourself if you did something illegal. They also make you report unlawful restraints, like if you tie a kid to the radiator or unlawful seclusions, you put them in a dark room or lock them in a closet. The stuff that happens in school. You have to report that stuff. Zero tolerance expulsion means that kid didn't get any due process, that he did this and you put him out of school. So you have to understand what a zero tolerance expulsion is. It's putting the kid out of the building for a year without him having any recourse, no due process, no hearing, no witnesses, no presenting evidence, none of those kinds of things. That is against the law. So in the first case study, what happened is Bobby turned in his brother's homework paper. Now, you could call it homework or you can call it an out-of-class assignment. It doesn't really matter. But Bobby turns in his out-of-class assignment. The teacher's response, Bobby's an 8th grader, the teacher's response is to make that homework assignment count more than, it's very, very important here, she makes the homework assignment count more than 50% of the yearly grade and fails Bobby for the year. By federal statute, that is a zero tolerance expulsion. She put him out for a whole year. Now, don't be that nitwit who argues, but she gave him the option to go to summer school. What does the law say? Even if you give them an opportunity to go to summer school or an alternative placement, that does not negate the fact that you put Bobby out for a year with no due process. So when you read the case and it says the handbook said that, that cheating or plagiarism may incur a failing grade, it means on the assignment, not for the year. Don't be that nitwit who thinks, well, it said it, you could fail. You can only fail the assignment. Federal law says you can't fail the kid for the year. You have to know that. You have to understand what a zero tolerance expulsion is. You have to understand that. So it can't mean that. Now, let's start with what laws has the teacher broke. Do you remember at the first work day every year, the required work day, one of the things that they go over with you is the faculty handbook at your school? Have any of you ever presented the faculty handbook? Some of you probably have. Or have you been part of the group that wrote the faculty handbook? Well, somewhere in that handbook at your school, it has the district adopted grading scale. Is that not accurate? And it has to be gone over with every year. Now, that district adopted scale is not, they don't just pull those percentages out of the air in terms of state tests, local assessments, homework, out of class assignments, classwork. There are guidelines that come from, in North Carolina, they come from the State Board of Education, and they do in South Carolina as well. Which exam? So here's your first pop quiz of the evening. And I'm going to ask Michelle, since she's worked haven't you worked in both states, Michelle?
Yes.
You worked in CMS and Fort Mill?
Yes, sir.
All right. So doesn't matter which state you're in. So Michelle, she's worked in both. What is the most a state exam can count? Do you know? By state law, by State Board of Education, what's the most that the state exam can, the end of year or end of course exam, what's the most it can count? They give a range. What's the most?
I think it's 20%.
Okay, it is 20 is what it counts, but it can count as much as 30. But it does count 20. You're exactly right. It counts 20 in North and South Carolina. But they would give you the opportunity for it to count 30 if you didn't have any local assessments. How much can homework count en masse for the whole year? For the whole year, how much can homework count for the whole year, according to state law? 10%.
Yeah.
What about out of class assignments? How much can they count en masse for the whole year? In total, 10%. You begin to see the problem with making one, you could call it an out of class assignment. I won't argue over that. By definition, it's actually homework. One homework assignment or one out of class assignment, you made one, not the whole year's worth. You made one worth more than 50% of the yearly grade. Do you see a problem with that? Somebody tell me, what is the problem with that?
That's more than the state exam.
Exactly.
It's worth.
Of course it is. Does that seem a little excessive to you? To make it count more than half the yearly grade and fail a kid over a homework assignment he turned in his brother's? Does that seem somewhat excessive? All right, so what's our two standards under the law? Arbitrary and capricious. What's arbitrary mean? We talked about this before. What does arbitrary mean? Sarah Sellers, was it me and you out back smoking? And Mandy called us. Mandy looks like she'd be kind of rough, even though she's a librarian. I think she'd be a little bit rough. She reminds me of my bride, who was a librarian before and taught halftime before she became a straight language arts, language arts, social studies curriculum specialist person. So arbitrary is you catch me and Sarah out back smoking. And Mandy's the one that catches us. She's the assistant principal that catches us. She sends Sarah back to class and she shoots me.
What's the problem?
Exactly. What's the problem? Well, it's arbitrary. She punished me, but didn't punish you. What's the capricious part? Stephanie, you're an AP in what, in Burt? Yeah. What's the capricious part of that? The arbitrary is she punished me and not Sarah. What's the capricious part?
I'm gonna say random.
No, that would be the arbitrary part. The capricious part is, did the punishment fit the crime?
Mm.
Seems a little excessive to shoot me, not to y'all, but it seems a little excessive to me to shoot me over something that insignificant. It's a whole lot more punishment than the handbook requires. So what we would do is we would go back and is turning in your brother's homework assignment, is that really a disciplinary thing, or is that more of an academic thing? So we would go back and we would look at our school code of conduct. And if we look at our school code of conduct, we've got several schools in a couple different states here, but in general, the most that you're going to be able to do to a kid is give him 2 days out in school suspension for plagiarism, turning in his brother's homework. Remember, it's just a homework assignment. It's not like he cheated on the state test. He just turned in somebody else's homework, happened to be his brother. So the most that you could do is give him 2 days ISS. And what did the teacher do? She gave him a 1-year expulsion. That seems a little excessive for turning in your brother's homework, don't you think? And so that is the crux of this case. There's a lot of political pieces that are thrown in there to throw you off track. And before you throw the superintendent under the bus, Steve's going to explain why the superintendent says to the principal, you just need to make sure you get this right and think about what you're doing. And Steve is going to talk to us about North Carolina General Statute 115C 288A, grade and classify pupils. All right, Steve, why didn't the superintendent, you were the superintendent in Burke for what, 11 years? I mean, excuse me, Wilkes for 11, and you were in
It was Wilkes for 9 and
9,
4.5. Yeah.
Yeah, and Wilkes for 9, and where was the other one?
Elkin City Schools.
Elkin.
Yeah.
So 14 years of superintendent experience, and he's going to defend the superintendent's action. Tell us why, Steve.
All right. So as all of you know, and can imagine, a lot of the folks come to the superintendent and want remedy for grading practices by a teacher or at a school. And the most important piece of this is that the superintendent has absolutely no authority over grading a student. So I couldn't at any point influence the grade of a child in school at no point. And that said, the principal can. The principal has the ultimate authority in grading and placing a student. So now, again, that gets a little bit problematic for the principal, and I'm sure Dale will talk about this as well. But for the superintendent's purpose, the superintendent is going to say, as Dale said, principal, you better get this right, because the superintendent cannot get involved in the grading of students. No authority, none. The superintendent can be influential in the handbook protocols, but once that's determined by the faculty and by the district, then it cannot be overruled by the superintendent.
That is correct.
Or the school board, for that matter.
That is correct. So North Carolina General Statute 115C 288A, to grade and classify pupils, is the duty and power of the principal, period. The superintendent can't bail you out if he wanted to. You have to make this decision. Principal shall have authority to grade and classify pupils, period. So, one of the things that I get quite often when we do these, Steve, we do these, and even when I do them in my classes, is why didn't the superintendent step in and help out? Superintendent can't do that. This is up to you as a principal. This is your purview. Teachers do not assign grades. You do. And so this teacher has willfully broken state law and local board policy on the grading scale. Now, I always tell people, full disclosure, we'll just go ahead and assume that Bobby's a turd. That's probably not a clinical definition or diagnosis, but that's probably pretty accurate. We'll just go ahead and acknowledge that. But the teacher's taking her shot. She's making a run at Bobby, whose family and probably the brother and the family are, probably just gigantic pains in the behind. But what are you going to do now? Now, please don't be those folks who say, well, Josh, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll support her publicly, but in private, we'll tell her not to do this again. Do you remember when you were about, probably just before you started to school, you're probably 4 or 5 years old, and your mama said, if your friend jumped off the roof, would you jump off too? This is that case. If the teacher breaks the law, are you going to break the law too? Remember, this is about your house. She's decided that she's willing to risk hers. Are you willing to risk yours? Your job and your livelihood, to support an obvious breach of the law, federal, state, and local board policy, all three. This is the trifecta. What is the break of the federal law? It's the first thing I covered tonight. What federal law has she violated? Zero what?
Zero tolerance.
Zero tolerance expulsion. She broke federal law. What state law did she break? She manipulated the grading scale, didn't she? She counted an out of work or out of class assignment or a homework assignment more than is allowable by the state. What local policies has she broken? What is the most that you can give a kid in terms of punishment for plagiarism? What's the most you can give them? 2 days ISS. What did she give them? A year expulsion from school. So this is a trifecta. She broke federal, state law, and local board policy. You need to map that out in your presentation, what you did. Superintendent can't bail out the principal. Why? Against the law. Principal grade and classifies. These are things that you've got to read and you've got to understand and you've got to know. Why can't you let this stand publicly and tell the teacher not to do it again privately? It is a violation of federal, state law and local board policy. Can anybody give you permission to break the law? That would be no. You will be the one who suffers. Now, we always get into a debate, and we'll get into that. We'll wait till you present when we get into the big hot and heavy. But what you need to be thinking about between now and then, as we move on to our next one here, I'm watching our time. What are you going to do with this teacher? What are you going to do with this teacher? Obviously, no due process was given for this child. Don't be the person who argues, well, they're going to let him go to summer school. That doesn't change the fact that it was a zero tolerance 1 year expulsion. You say, but he just failed. You didn't expel him. He has to wait a whole year to resume his career. That's a year expulsion by federal law. What are you going to do with the teacher? Lisa, I see you sitting there, like you're grinding. What would you do, Lisa? I'm going to call you out.
Okay, I had to come. What would I do with the teacher?
Letter of reprimand, action plan, move for dismissal. That's kind of your three options, isn't it?
Would this be considered, how would due process come into play here with the teacher?
How
So
we
which
do
one,
process?
which one to go first, like the tiers, when you're dealing with the teacher?
All right, so that's what that's what we would do is we would call the teacher in and say, why did you do this? And obviously she would say, because I have the authority to do that. And you would remind her of that grading scale that's in the front of the handbook that says, no, you don't have the authority to do this. But that if that's your story and you're sticking to it, you're telling them that this wasn't an error, that you on your own volition broke state law and local board policy on the grading scale. You're telling us that that's what you did. And you know, that teacher gets to tell her side of the story, and her side of the story is this kid cheated. I have made this project, this homework, count more than half the yearly grade, and he fails. And if that is her response, then your response is either a letter of reprimand, put the teacher on an action plan, or move for the teacher's dismissal. Those are your three options.
So what if during that investigation as the administrator, it is found out that that teacher was not duly trained for that? Because
Don't go that way. I told you to start
sorry.
with. Believe.
Sorry.
Don't be a teacher now. Don't be a teacher. This is not an administrator problem.
Okay.
This
Okay.
problem was not created. Steve's laughing. It happens every semester.
Yeah.
How can
Every
we
time.
wiggle off the hook for that teacher? Steve, I'll let you rant a little bit.
Well, I'm gonna rant just how much training, I mean, are we gonna train her to read? Because it's in the handbook. It's in the handbook. So, I mean, at some point, this is a part of the responsibility of every employee is to know what is in the handbook. These are the protocols we will use at this school. And so, no, we're not going to fall back on this training crap.
I'm happy you said that because
Listen, no, I'm not picking on you. This is it has evolved into, oh, I wasn't trained to do that. And that's with every excuse that everybody makes. Principals make it, superintendents make it, everybody makes it, all God's children. And you know, and we, by the way, we do it, it happens at Gardner Webb too. You know, we have a MELS handbook, a EDLS handbook, a EDCI handbook. You've seen your EDCI handbook, you got your dissertation handbook, and somehow, you know, when something goes wrong when you're writing, oh, well, you didn't tell us that. You know, I mean, at some point it has to be a responsibility of the person to read. And that's, so that's a long answer to what you were saying. But you're right, Elaine, that we don't have unions in North Carolina. The union would say, oh, she wasn't trained properly, blah, 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 blah. I can guarantee you that, and NCAE would here. And I don't think that's going to carry much weight.
I agree. And I just asked because it's funny, when I was doing the interviews with my the different administrators at my school, and we were looking at some of the questions that kept coming up in our FAC meetings, we realized that a lot of us teachers really don't read the handbook. And that's why we keep asking these questions, and it, to the person who knows the handbook, these questions come off so silly. Like, you should have known this, you know. So that's why I asked, because yeah, a lot of us, and I'm guilty of some parts of that too, because
I'm guilty too.
some parts of that book.
It's like, you know, it's like when I buy something and I look at the picture and think I can put it together without reading the directions. You know, you've got to read.
Yeah.
You have to, and that's an expectation. Uh-oh, that triggered Dale. Look out, everybody. Duck.
So I don't know that I mentioned that you should read this, but what does it have under the course overview that aligns with Gardner-Webb's grading policy? Is you got 6 OMA assignments. There were 600, 6 weekly, 4 case studies times 2 is 8 possible, and it tells you the breakdown on the percentage of what each of these count. So, your OMA assignment is 30%, your weekly assignments are 30%, and your case studies are 40%. That's the way it breaks down. It's pretty simple, isn't it? Now, if you don't read that and you say, well, I don't think those weekly assignments, I don't think those, that don't seem like very much. Well, right there, the points are. And we have these in all of our shells. They're in our syllabi. We're talking about for us at the level. Now you say, what's that got to do with us? Good teachers do the same thing. They break down what assignments are in their class this year. They go through each one of those. They know what they are. It aligns with the district's grading policy, the adopted policy. And now I'm not calling your administration out, but by state law, they're supposed to read that policy to you or have you take time to read it at that required workday every fall, because it's number 1 on the list of duties and responsibilities of the principal. It's number 1. It has to be, this can't be one of those, well, the teacher didn't know. Well, she could say that, but I could tell you I weigh 150 pounds, but your eyes tell you a different story. We can't go that way. So we're back to the original question, which is letter of reprimand, action plan, move for dismissal. What are you going to do now, hero? Somebody, anybody. Now we'll do a head count when we actually present. But what are you thinking right now? Sarah Morton, what are you thinking? I know, I knew Sarah was getting ready to hit the buzzer.
Yeah, it was. So I would think it would depend on what the teacher has done up to that point. Like
No,
on a letter, it wouldn't.
No. This one's got to stand on its own.
Okay.
Got to stand on its own. One of the things that we have to be careful of in due process is what can be entered into evidence against somebody. And generally speaking, unless it's sexual in nature, we can't do we can't save them up and put them all together, kind of thing. Each incident kind of has to stand on its own. The only thing, it's just like when we do discipline for kid, the only thing that we can do to kid where we can give them a maximum punishment for is if they've shown a pattern of sexual behavior. That's the only really one that the courts will support you doing that on. Other than that, everything kind of has, part of due process is it has to stand on its own. That's why I said when you bring her in, you're talking about this incident. You're not talking about last year, last week, all the bad things she's done over the course of her career. You have to adjudicate it on the basis of this instance. That's her due process rights as well. You can't go back and pull everything back to her. She was at a raver during college, did something bad. You can't do that kind of thing. I mean, we have to be fair, and we have to follow due process. So we can only look at, and I'm glad Sarah brought that up, and that's part of your thinking going forward is, we have to adjudicate her on the basis of this incident, what she's done here. We can't stack several unrelated things together. That would be a violation of her due process rights. We have to look at this one incident alone, but this is a pretty big one. You've violated federal law, state law, local board policy. And so my question to you, and this is kind of, again, this is rhetorical. Other than sexually or physically abusing a child, what's the most harm or damage you can do to a child? What's the most punishment you can give them? Take a year of school away. That's the most you can do. Did any or all of you know that you can't expel a kid from school permanently? That the most you can do is a 1-year exclusion, and at the end of 1 year, no matter what they did, they can apply to come back. So she has given this kid the maximum punishment. This kid could have brought a gun to school and not gotten this much punishment. Would have probably had to discharge the weapon to get this much, and maybe even hit somebody to get this much punishment. And he turned in his brother's homework paper. And this is the perspective that you need to see. This is not an administrator problem. The administrator is not in the wrong here. Didn't do anything bad. This person of their own volition said, I'm gonna take a run at Bobby. Him and his family are, they're a pain in my posterior. So I'm taking a run at it. But on the other hand, as we pointed out to Sarah Morton, you can't put everything together on the teacher. You have to be due process has to cut both ways for her as well. We have to adjudicate her only on this incident. But this is a pretty bad incident. This is a pretty bad one. So, when you're doing your work, part of what you're going to be doing is you're going to be adjudicating this in terms of the law. You'll also adjudicate it through the lens of the role of the principal, which you'll look at the 4 ethical paradigms of care, justice, critique, and profession. You'll look at it through those lenses as well. What about the ethical piece? The legal piece is pretty dead bang. She's violated all 3. But what about the ethical piece as well? And then in the end, what are you going to do? What would you do? Questions about case 1. I've outlined the case for you. I've told you all the secrets, the hidden parts. You just got to do the work now. Put it all together and know what you're arguing. Because in the end, you're going to have to come up with a decision about what you're going to do with this person. Questions you have for me?
Dale, one of the fun things, I think this might be your favorite case study.
Mhm.
And it is mine as well. And one of the things we enjoy, everybody, is and we've talked about this before, that every time you make a decision, there's ramifications, and there are ramifications beyond just dealing with the teacher on this. And so we will be interested in either in your write-ups or in dialogue that we have when we're together of okay, so if you do this, then what? And how's everything going to play out in your mind? Because it's part of being a decision maker is kind of knowing that reactions will happen, and you're going to have to be able to deal with that as well. And part of the dealing with that is the full knowledge that in all likelihood you can't talk about it. So
Yeah.
you're just going to be taking your shots and not be able to defend yourself in many ways, but you have to be able to play through that in your mind too. So it is really a neat case, because it's just to say she violated the law. Yeah, that's the easy piece of this case study. There are just so many other intricacies with it, and that's why I've inferred that it's Dale's favorite. I absolutely love the case.
Absolutely.
And and I want to just go back to one other thing that Dale and I both have said to you before, with not using power in the wrong way, because power sometimes can be an evil word, but don't ever forget, when you talked about what superintendent saying, okay, principal, you need to get this right. The principal is the most powerful position in the school business. It's not the superintendent. And that is, and you can see for all these cases that Dale is assigning and all the discussions that Dale is doing with you now, you see the power that comes with the principalship, the influence that comes with the principalship. And again, for us, that's why we coveted being a principal. We enjoyed that not because we coveted power, but because we enjoyed being able to influence, hopefully, good things for people. And that's my editorial comment. Now I'll go back in my shell, Dale. It's your turn
No,
again.
it's good. But again, when you're thinking about what you're going to do with the teacher, you got to think about the faculty, your relationship with them, as Steve said. You got to be thinking about your relationship with the superintendent. You got to be thinking about your relationship with the school board and the Chamber of Commerce, you know, your school community. You've got all these different constituency groups. And again, and Steve made a great point there. You're not going to be, because this is a personnel issue, you're not going to be able to go out and put up a billboard and say, this is why I did what I did. You're just going to have to say it's personnel matter. You know, and that may factor into your decision as well, that you will just assume that you can't go out and talk about this. You'll just have to make that assumption. But you got to figure out what you're going to do. Now, the role of the principal, and again, I pulled that one up from, let me share my screen. Let's see, I pulled that up from, from our from Sunday, October, when is that one? Sunday morning, October 2nd. The role of the principal, that's the document I pulled up. That's got all the laws for the principal. But at the end, it's also got the 4 ethical paradigms. And I put some key phrases in here, some examples of what the ethical paradigms for administrators are for the school executive. Justice, care, critique, and profession. So justice is fairness, equity, and justice. The standard, as I just talked about, is arbitrary and capricious, or reasonable suspicion versus probable cause. Is the standard there is police have to have probable cause. We only have to have reasonable suspicion. We have much more power than they do to search and seize and to question and do that. We don't have to have probable cause. We just have to have reasonable suspicion when we're dealing with students. The standards of justice are arbitrary and capricious. Arbitrary, again, is you don't punish everybody. You punish one, let one go. Capricious is you give way more punishment than the handbook calls for. You know that code of conducts have minimums and maximums for all the infractions. We'll have covered that by the time that we get there. Do you go outside of that? Corporal punishment is illegal. That's running, marching, paddling, do whatever. Jim Crow. Jim Crow is my example here of unwritten things that are just kind of the way we've always done things to certain people or certain groups. That's a justice issue. It doesn't have to be written down. And another one that I've got there is that popped up in some cases is metal detectors are illegal. These are kind of random thoughts, but they trigger certain things. It's not inequitable. It's not an injustice. It's not an invasion, because remember, the standard is reasonable suspicion. So you can use metal detectors where you might have to have probable cause if you weren't in the school business. Care, loyalty, and trust. Again, when we're talking about how's the faculty going to take this, whatever we do or don't do. Loyalty and trust, concern and connection, nurtured, encouraged versus achievement. Also, care for our students, relationships, collaboration, shared decision-making, connections, attention, support, discipline, and problem. So care is also about the other faculty, but also about students. Critique, corrupted morals, power, critical theory. That's what Steve was just talking about. Social class, incident type versus action type. Do you give the 2 kids do the same thing? What do you do? You do different things to different ones. That's why we track ourselves with Power School. That's one of the things that we do for inter-rater reliability when you have a large staff. Now, full disclosure, my time as a principal and Steve's both, I'll stop the share. We did disciplinary data collection. Now, in CMS, we had a program called NC-wise. That was the precursor to Power School. We could collect some data in it, and if you knew how to manipulate it, you know, in our day, it was very horse and buggy, but it was there. And if you knew how to get it out, you could run some analyses on your disciplinary data. And one of the things that I tried to do at the weekly meetings from the administrative team was look at where are our hot spots. You had to put location on these things. You know, where are these things happening? Do we have enough supervision there? Are teachers not helping and not doing their duty station? I mean, we would look at those things, but we would also look at inter-rater reliability. And that goes back to that piece of critique. You have to critique yourself. So what that means is if I've got 6 people processing discipline at a high school, do kids get roughly the equivalent with each of the 6 administrators, or do certain ones have certain pet peeves? And you've got to monitor, you got to critique yourself when you're doing those kinds of things. You know, certain people have certain pet peeves, certain things bother folks, some folks more than others. You know, I was on the phone just prior to this meeting with a fellow that used to work with me a long time ago, and he'd called because he's applied for a job nearby and he's asking for a reference. And the last place that he was at, you know, a kid called him a name, you know, but that's his trigger. He can't deal with that. So he's looking for another job. And I don't know how many jobs he's had over the years. He was a staff level position. But, you know, he thought that kid ought to be shot because the kid called him a name. Well, I mean, you know, that wouldn't bother me a bit, but to him it does. That's what critique is. You have to look at your staff and say, 2 kids do exactly the same thing. You know, Sarah Morton processes one, Stephanie processes the other. Did they give them roughly equivalent consequences? Or are we uneven? You know, do we not have inter-rater reliability of what we do? So that's part of that critique, is we have to critique ourselves. Are we doing the same things? And then the ethics of the profession, accountability for student academic and social success, model principles of self-awareness, safeguard values, democracy, equity, and diversity, consider and evaluate potential moral legal consequences of decision-making, promote social justice and ensure that individual students' needs inform all aspects of schooling. Best interest of students' rights and responsibility respects are key to making decisions of students in the best interest. So you have to adjudicate these cases not only on the law here, but also you have to put it through the lens of ethical behavior as well when you're doing these case studies. And you should address this in your presentation. And this will lead you, hopefully, to the decision that you make as to what you'll do with this teacher and the argument as to why. But as Steve said and pointed out so very well, that this has ramifications beyond just you and Bobby and, you know, Bobby's parents. I mean, the community at large, school board, superintendent, the faculty at the school. I mean, there's a lot of different constituents here, and you're not going to be able to go out and talk about this case. So a lot to think about, a lot in your presentation. These are not going to be as quick and easy. You know, the law piece is pretty simple, but that's the only simple part of this. Shantae, you hadn't said a word tonight. I'm concerned.
Cause this is the first time I'm sitting here taking 1,000 notes because you keep talking. And my question to you is, when I was reading chapter 2 about all these thousands of laws, like how is the normal person supposed to memorize? Because when you say law such and such, NC 562, like how do you remember all of this?
I cheat. I have eidetic memory.
Oh, okay.
Pretty easy for me.
Okay. You know, I just have mom brain, so
You just have to. So as I believe I told when we were together last, I don't expect you to remember all of these, or as the kids say, remember all of these. But what you have to know is you have to have somebody that you can call, somebody that you can ask. You have to have a sixth sense that, you know, for me, it's real simple. I don't have any hair on my head, so it kind of slid down my back. So when the hair on my back stands up, I know I better ask somebody. I've heard that before. The whole notion here is we're trying to give you a wide enough perspective that you'll know to go and look. You read your law book, you'll know, hey, I better read that manual. I better know that. And the manual that you should really read is the disciplinary data reporting manual. It has most of this stuff in it, but there's no substitute for experience. Talk to somebody, find a mentor in the business that can lead you through. Hopefully, when you become an AP, somebody on your administrative team will help you through these things and kind of get you up to speed. But most people can't remember all this stuff. But you know that this strikes my ear. I've heard that before. I might better think on that. Don't make snap decisions. Work the due process. I might better read or ask. I might better refer to the code of conduct. It has it has everything laid out in those. So yeah, it's not as easy as it looks. And there's 545 general statutes under 115C in North Carolina. 545. And it addresses everything in the world. And you better keep that. You better keep that stat. I used to keep my statute book. I mean, it was dog-eared as bad as my everyday Bible. Now it's all online. But back in the day, Steve and I had one that had what was it? Had a green cover on it. Steve was kind of
green cover. Yeah,
had a green cover.
Yep.
And it was kind of just a plain cover, and it said North Carolina statutes.
Public school laws of North Carolina.
That is correct. And you kept that thing on your desk. I didn't even have it behind my desk on the shelf. I had it on the desk.
Mm-hmm.
High school principal, you better have it on the desk. That is correct.
But Shantae, you recovered nicely on that one. I think that one of the things that going back, we as principals ought to know our own handbook.
Yeah,
because we helped to write it, and the board policy manual is also going to align with public school law, but that doesn't necessarily mean you need to know all of that. I want to go back to one of the things, and this is how this kind of weaves together. Remember our conversation of the Maxwell's laws, and one of them was the intuition thing. And I said, do women have more intuition than men? It's the same thing that Dale's talking about here of the hair standing up on his back since it can't do it on his head. The same thing of something doesn't feel right here. And you all will have that feeling when you see something that's happening. It just, you will get the feeling, and it doesn't mean that something bad happened or something wrong happened necessarily. It just didn't feel right. And then you look it up, and Dale will say this a million times, friends. You don't have to know it. You need to know how to find it. And that's the key. And so whether it's looking up public school law or calling somebody and say, I've got a scenario for you, whatever it is, you need to know how to find it. So Shantae, don't worry about knowing all these things that Dale, I mean, he's been teaching 603 now for about 83 years. So he's got all of these public school laws. They've been part of the case studies that he's been doing. So yes, he's going to know those, but that doesn't mean that any of you or even I need to know all of those, because I haven't been teaching these things, and even if I have, I wouldn't know as much as he. But I think that, so in my case, I either pull out the law book or say, Dale, where do you find this? And he would say, here's where you look, and that's how that happens.
there are three. Thank you, Steve. That's set up. There are three main documents that you need to have for school law. First is the statutes, public school laws in North Carolina. They're all under 115C. There's 545 of them. You can get a hardback book or you can just get them online and it tells exactly what they are. You just click on, all you gotta do is Google NCGS 115C. NC, North Carolina General Statutes. South Carolina, they're called titles. You just Google it, the South Carolina titles. And it tells you what they all are. And so South Carolina does theirs a little bit differently. There's 70 titles. They have multiple parts. They have the same number, but it's just organized differently. That's number one, your law book. Number two is your disciplinary data reporting manual. Number three is the code of conduct for your district. If you've got those three documents, that will cover 99% of the legal issues that you will have. Those are your three. So when you're doing disciplinary data reporting, or when you're doing due process, processing discipline, you need that district handbook, which is called the code of conduct, that tells you what the infractions are and what the range of consequences that you give, how to report it, what to report. All that's in the reporting manual. So let me share my screen and we'll look at those right quick.
Dr. Land, can I ask a question real quick for our group?
Yeah.
All right. So the expectation with these case studies, so we have 4 case studies. And so our group, we're going to create a presentation for each of the 4 case studies.
You are?
And so this, okay, and we're going to respond to, like you said, the process that we went through.
Yes.
And so on this last weekend, like the TD Jakes weekend, so we're all every
Saturday.
Yes.
All day Saturday.
Yeah. So every single group is going to present case 4.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So like we can do this at our own pace. Like if we got behind a week, we can pick up this week and do 2.
Do 2 what?
Like if we need to do like within our because I'm thinking like we can just do one presentation with all the case studies in one.
No, you gotta do a separate presentation for all 4 case studies.
Okay. Well, can we just pick up, like what if I saw that it said it's due on November 12th.
Mm-hmm.
So what if we do 2 in a, like, I don't know, like, do we all have?
It's up to y'all when you're gonna get together and collaborate and do these, and y'all might do them. You might knock them all out at one time.
Okay.
That's up to y'all.
As long as we're prepared to present on 4 for the last weekend.
That is correct. You will do 4 separate presentations.
Okay, and
Of each of these case studies, you'll have a PowerPoint. Now, it doesn't need to be, the PowerPoint doesn't need to be 100, to be long. You just need to make sure you hit the law, and then the ethical piece, and then what you're going to do, or what your decision is. What comes out of this.
Okay, so the law, the issue, and what's next?
The law, the ethical concern, the four paradigms of ethics: care, justice, critique, profession. You need to run these cases through those. Does it hit any of those notes? Is it good, bad, or indifferent? But what is the law? I've already told you the teacher broke the law. Federal, state, local board policy. It's not hard.
So law.
But in the end, the trick is for y'all is what are you going to do? What are you going to do with the teacher and why? You're looking at the political piece. This is the broadest case. But what are you going to do?
Okay. So law, ethics, and what's next?
Yeah, you got questions. Each of these case studies has the questions that you have to answer in your presentation. Let's go back and look.
Okay.
So if we look at case study 1. Right here, be sure you have read chapters 6 and 8 in the Principal's Quick Reference Guide. Make sure that you have read the lesson plan, role of the principal. It's got the law and the ethics piece in it. What should the principal's course of action be? That's what we're asking you. Be sure to address issues of due process, standards of arbitrary and capricious. Address the 4 ethical paragraphs. Create as a team a short PowerPoint presentation that addresses number 2 and 3 above. You'll have 15 to 30 minutes to present. Not on June 12th, but you'll have to do that. And then you do the half-page reflection. That's your individual. But right here, what should the principal's course of action be? What are you going to do with the student and with the teacher? That's what that's $64 question. What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do, hero? What laws did you break? What are you gonna do? Right here tells you exactly, this gives you exactly what you need under case study 1. All right. And here's the case right here. And here are the things to do. I got directions under each one of them. Couldn't be simpler. Okay. All right. Questions about case study 1. You know what you're supposed to do. Here's the directions. Here's the case. I've given you, I've told you all the answers. It's like flipping to the back of the book in math. I've given you all the answers. We just need to see you work now. We just need to see your work. All right, case study 2. All right. So right here, be sure you've read chapter 2, resource allocation and planning, in your resource management book. Review the Leandro case from North Carolina on funding. Is the superintendent's plan appropriate? Present both sides of the issue. And then again, you do that, and then do your ethics, and then you create as a PowerPoint, and then you do your half page. All right, so now this is a short one. This one is just case study 1, letter to the community. This is about a superintendent. But it's illustrative for both superintendents and principals. And so what the superintendent wants to do, so last year he gave some schools some extra money and did student-based budgeting, and he gave at 4 schools, and he gave them a little bit of extra money. So this year his plan is he's going to set this thing, this student-based funding, he's going to make it district-wide this year, where some schools and kids are going to get more money than others. And so you are to dive into the Leandro case, which is the case for nationwide for school funding. So let me give you a little background. North Carolina, since the beginning of time, and South Carolina have done flat grant funding. What does that mean, Dale? Well, it means that money from the state that comes to your school district per pupil comes per pupil. Every student, you get $8,000 basically for every student, regardless of whether they're high risk, low risk, at risk, doesn't matter. You get $8,000 per pupil, period. So ever how many pupils you have in your school, you get $8,000 per pupil. Now, a couple of caveats here. Number 1, you don't get all $8,000 up front. They divide into 10 equal payments. You get $800, a month for these students that are enrolled in your building. Also, they deduct absenteeism. That's why the principal's on you all the time about taking roll. It's about money. They subtract absenteeism. So if you've got 5% absenteeism, $800 that month, 5 times 8 is 40. You only get $760 for kids in your building that month, because they don't fund kids that don't come to school. We say, well, they're on the roll. Doesn't matter. They only fund the ones that come, and they do it monthly. Now, they don't give you the money up front. They only give you the money after the first 20 days if you've spent the money correctly. So you have to have a fund balance in your district. And Steve's going to talk about that. As superintendent, one of the things you have to have is funds on hand to start the district.
Let's have 3 months.
3 months. You need 3 months. Some districts have gotten in trouble lately by only having 1 month because of COVID. But it's good policy, good fiscal policy to have at least 3 months on hand to start, because the state's not going to give you money to start. They're going to reimburse you down the road. It's called modified accrual accounting system. They're going to give you money down the road for money. They'll reimburse money you spend. What happens if you didn't spend the money appropriately? Will they reimburse that money? That would be no. So you got to understand. So if you've got kids that are harder to educate or more expensive, it doesn't matter. The state says you get $8,000 per kid. So in 1993, 94, a group of 5 low wealth school districts got together and they sued the state. They said, this is not equitable. So they said, here is the problem. So let me pull up this. All right. So let me share my screen now. So you get $8,000. Everybody see this? 8,000 per pupil. And so that means you get 800 a month, 810 monthly payments. Minus absenteeism. All right. But you get 8,000 per pupil. The low wealth district said that's all we can afford. However, in Charlotte, Mecklenburg, and some of the wealthy districts, we got the 8,000 per pupil from the state, and we're willing to tax ourselves another 4,000. For a total of $12,000. So at the time, Charlotte Mecklenburg was spending $12,000 per pupil. And the poor counties were spending $8,000 per pupil. And so what they said was, and this was Hoke and Robinson and several of them, they said, this is not fair. This is not equitable. They're adding another 4,000. Now, full disclosure, I'm sitting in Mecklenburg County tonight. We have the highest tax rate of any of the 100 counties in North Carolina. I'm sitting in the township of Cornelius here at Lake Norman. We have the highest city tax of any town in North Carolina. I pay probably twice what you pay in property taxes. The evaluations here are the highest percentage in the state as well. And what does that mean? Of market value. You know, when they come out and do the assessment, most places try to do between 50 and 60 of what they perceive to be market value. Not here. We do 80% of market value in Mecklenburg County. So last year alone, my property taxes, the evaluation on my house went up, not two, went up $160,000 in 1 year. But people live here. We're willing to pay that to have quality schools. And we have real estate, you know, most of the local tax, you know, local money for schools comes from real estate and business. Well, there's a lot of businesses in Mecklenburg County. There's a lot of industry. There's a lot of taxable stuff. Real estate's very high here, very plentiful. And so we're willing to pay, we match 50% of what the state does just to have extra teachers, extra stuff, whatever we want. Capital needs, new buildings, new school on every corner, we're willing to pay. But what about if you're in Hope County and even though you might be willing, you just don't have the property tax base. You don't have if you're in Robinson County, you don't have the industry. There's nobody to tax. It's not that we're not willing. It's just, we just don't have it. So what they said, they sued this, the Leandro case was a family in Hope County, but they sued the state and said, we want you to change the flat grant formula to a district power equalizing with a recapture provision. And what that would mean would be this. Let me share my screen again. So what we would do is we would give Hope County, I'm just using Hope because they were the main plaintiff. We would give them $8,000 from the state. We would take $2,000 from Charlotte Mecklenburg and give them. So in the end, they would have 10,000. And of course, in Mecklenburg, they had 12,000. We took 2,000 from them. In terms of what we did was we gave them 6,000 in state money and gave the other two to Hoke, plus the 4,000 they were willing to add. And so Hoke and Meck both ended up with 10. That's what they wanted done. They wanted the state to hold back money from the wealthy districts and give it to them, so that they went from 8 to 10, and they held 2,000 back from the wealthy districts, and that's the money, so that they both ended up with 10. And so at the end of the Leandro case, what was held in the Leandro case is this, and this is under case study materials. And Duke Law has summarized it for you. It's very helpful. So right here, Leandro Duke Law. And it says very clearly here, what was held, that means what they found. That neither school districts nor counties have any constitutional right to equal funding. So Leandro lost this case. We still have flat grant funding. Everybody still gets the same amount, rich or poor. That kids have a fundamental right to a basic education. That if you take money, they may not get that, even though, but that the state says it's $8,000, and that's what we're going to give everybody. That you don't get more than that, and that we're not going to change that, and you as a county cannot do that either. It says right here, the Supreme Court ruled the state of North Carolina, not local districts, have the ultimate constitutional obligation to actively safeguard and successfully deliver every child's Leandro right. That's a right to a basic education at $8,000. No exceptions, no excuses. So the superintendent wants to, in this particular district, wants to take money from the wealthy side of town and give it to the poor side of town. Is that legal? According to what you just read, that would be no. It is not legal to take kids' money from one kid. Now, the ethical piece of it, do you think the people that got the money taken from them, you think they'd be happy? No, they would not be happy. Now, we can talk about justice and equity and trying to, make sure they even everything up. Then people on the other side would argue that case too. Now, I'm not sure I put it in here for y'all because I don't want you to get that. But don't get too deep down into the Leandro wormhole. Leandro continues on even today because they said, we'll start the education lottery and we'll get some capital money to give these low wealth districts. But it's no appropriation, it's pork barrel. And it's very, very, very little. And it's gotten so wide and so far apart. You see this shirt I'm wearing tonight, Gardner-Webb University? Gardner-Webb is a private Christian university in Bowling Springs, North Carolina. We got one stoplight. Gardner-Webb just got a $500,000 appropriation to help fund a amphitheater for outdoor concerts in sunny downtown Bowling Springs. That money came from the General Assembly. Tim Moore, I guess, is a Speaker of the House, is a Cleveland County resident, and he was instrumental in helping Gardner-Webb secure this $500,000 grant. It's the first time a private college in North Carolina has ever gotten an appropriation like this. It came from lottery money. It's a capital appropriation. So you can imagine there's not a lot left over. Time you pay the winners of the lottery, time you pay that idiot that advertises, wears that Tuesday sign that commercials come on every few minutes during a ball game. I guess gambling or scratchers go with that or whatever. and the lottery company, and there's just not much money left. So it hasn't really made a dent. But don't go down the rabbit hole of, it continues. And now the judge says the General Assembly's got to give $2 billion to make up for the deficit over the last nearly 30 years. What's illustrative for us is, can you move federal, state, or local money? Federal money follows the kids. That would be no. Leandro says you can't move state money. And what does Leandro further say? You can't move local money either. Now, if you got it built into your budget with your, then you could move a little bit around, but you can't do that unless it's approved it's in the school board's budget. The problem with that is, are school boards in North and South Carolina empowered to levy their own taxes? Let me say that again. Are school boards in North and South Carolina, are they empowered to levy their own taxes and fund their own budget? That would be no. Who funds school board budgets in North and South Carolina? County commissioners. So Steve, talk about we'll do it in Wilkes County. Talk about the process for the budget in Wilkes County. What do you have to do as superintendent?
Well, the first thing that has to happen, and first of all, the superintendent gets with people within the school district and develops a budget, and then presents it to the school board to be adopted as a budget proposal. And then the budget proposal is presented to the county commission for their review, and they then ultimately will determine how much of that budget is approved, as the county commission has to adopt its budget by June 30th. And so they appropriate local dollars to the school board in accordance with the June 30 cutoff date for them. The state, by the way, does not have a cutoff date. They're supposed to, but they don't. And so that's why we sometimes go through a period of time where we don't have a state budget, and it puts school districts in another quandary, which is another reason why you have a fund balance. But going back to it, it's a process, and you begin the budgeting process. I don't know that it ever ends, but you begin it typically in February, so that by 1st of April, you are ready to present to the commission. They give you a budget calendar. Every county does, and you present it to them. So that's the process.
All right, sir. What would happen if you added something in like, we want to fund some extra money over here to these schools? What would happen if that was in your budget that you presented to the county commissioners and they didn't like that, for example? What would happen then?
Well, they have the option not to appropriate, for one thing, but let me say to all of you, because this is you're all in different districts. In Wilkes County, I was very fortunate. I mean, you make a line item budget, but the county commission in Wilkes County, and the same in Surrey County when I was in Elkin, did not micromanage. They believed that the school board was elected to distribute the funds, and so the commissioners did not want to immerse themselves into making those decisions, that which can be a political hot potato. So, but there are school board, boards of commissioners that really go line item and say, we'll give you this money if you will do this, and that comes into play. So, but I would also say that being transparent is critical. If you lose the trust of the county commission, if you're trying to sneak this in, so we're going to treat this group of people a little bit better than this group of people, you're going to pay a price for it ultimately, and you will pay a price for it in appropriations, and that's I think that's what you were getting at, Dale. I don't know.
That's exactly it. And we'll use Annie as the example here. She's got, Annie's in Rutherford County. The commissioners in Rutherford County are elected by district. Is that not right, Annie?
Yes, it is.
All right. So if I am the commissioner from District 1 and the budget is going to take money from my schools and give it to the schools in District 2, what would be the political ramifications of that if I were a county commissioner? Would I be likely to get reelected? In Rutherford County, I don't think I'd have to really worry about reelection. I'd be worried about my personal safety. Somebody might try to burn my house down with me in it, knowing my group from there. And so the notion here is you can't move federal money, you can't move state money. The only money that you could have any kind of leverage over moving would be local money. But in a case like this, if you try to do something illegal or do an end run, it's not going to happen. So the superintendent's plan is illegal on all three parts of it. Now, there was a superintendent recently, and I think I have this article posted by Donald in Chapel Hill, Carborough. Everybody knows where Chapel Hill, Carborough is, where UNC Chapel Hill is. It's a tale of two cities. Chapel Hill is the mostly white affluent side. Carborough is not. And so the superintendent there said, I want to get more money to the Carborough side. And you can't. Federal law, state law, local budget can't do it. So she said, well, I can spend up to $90,000 discretionary without the board having to approve it. And so she drew up a contract with a private consulting firm for about $1 million, and the payments were like $89,900. But it was supposed to be one time. But the problem is one of the school board members was a retired principal whose granddaughter was on the Chapel Hill side and said, wait a minute, that violates the Leandro rule. You can't do that. And of course, they immediately fired the finance officer. The superintendent went on a medical leave, and they were able to, she was out within about 2 weeks. That happened just prior to the pandemic. She left early that, and I have that if you want to read that one, but that happened. And so the notion here is this is illegal from so many different perspectives, but when we talk about equity, so I want you to focus on what in the law says this is illegal. Federal law, federal programs, money follows the kids. State law, you need to look at the Leandro ruling. You need to understand what Leandro says. Don't go down the rabbit hole of the West Ed, the final, the stuff in the last few years. What does the ruling say about how the money has to be allotted? Is school-based funding, is that a legal thing in North or South Carolina? It is not. And then look at the ramifications of understanding who funds school budgets, county commissioners. Most of those are in districts within those commissions are generally in districts. Look at your own county. Look at your own county. Do you have all at large county commissioners, or do they run in certain districts? If they run in certain districts, what would be the chance that they would vote for a budget that was unbalanced? Probably not. It would have to be, the superintendent couldn't decide up front, we're going to do this. The commission would have to have decided that, and then it would work backwards. So in this case, there is no policy in place that would allow for this at the local level either. So you need to know those things and then run it through the process. All right. Questions about case study 2? It's about funding. It's about how we get our money, where it comes from. It's, school activity report, principal, PP, the principal's monthly report, PMR, which has attendance, school activity report, which is where the kids are. All those things are now kept electronically. And so it's hard to, it's hard to hoodoo people over the money, but that's how we get our money. Case study 3 is, I can close that one. Back to case study 3.
Nails, you looked that up. Let me just make this comment just for general, I don't know, whatever. Leandro was decided in
97.
97. And we're still playing with it, you know, just trying to figure it out. And you get lawsuits and legislation and back and forth between the legislators in North Carolina and the judicial system. And so if you look in South Carolina, you have the corridor of shame, which is the same thing. And lawsuits have come out of that. And, you know, the legislature gets pressured to provide opportunities for that portion of South Carolina, which is badly underfunded, and lawsuits come on that. And it reminds us of, if you look at the legal system, if you look at Brown versus Board of Education, which was decided by the Supreme Court in 1954, if you come, and Dale and I are old enough to remember this, the first desegregated classroom for me was 1965, which was my
66 for me.
third grade year for me, third grade year. So in first and second grade, there was a separation still in Gaston County. Now, the Supreme Court decided it in 1954, which is before Dale and I were born. But it took that long to get there. This is the frustration of politics, and you know, and there'd be others to say, well, that's the good part of politics, that people stand up for what they believe in. But in this case, it was a major frustration that this was decided by the Supreme Court, and it just never got implemented for 11 years in most of North Carolina. And Leandro's the same way. I do want to say this too. I know we're running out of time. Accompanying Leandro, this is just for your general knowledge, it's not a part of this case study. The other district, there were 5 districts that sued, and I was a superintendent when this happened. So the districts that did not, quote, benefit from Leandro said, wait a minute, you are now not treating districts equitably because we, and I could say Wilkes County, Surrey County, Gaston County, anywhere else that was not a part of Leandro, we have disadvantaged kids too. And so if you're saying that the disadvantaged kids in these 5 counties deserve more funding, then what about us? Because the disadvantaged kids in Wilkes County deserve more funding as well. So then the state went back and came up with another pot of money. It was called the DSSF money, Disadvantaged Student Supplemental Fund. So we all got a new revenue stream. It wasn't huge, but we did get a new revenue stream, and that came into play too. So it's this political wheel never stops, and it doesn't mean we agree with it, but that's where all this comes from. And so Leandro triggered a lot in South Carolina. Corridor of Shame triggered a lot, but it's still not close to where it ought to be for funding to give everybody perhaps what they need to be successful in the school business. All right, I'm done with that.
But again, the takeaway piece is what Leandro wanted to do was change the formula of how the state, and so as Steve just pointed out, we didn't touch the formula. That did not happen. Plaintiffs lost the case. Now, over the years, they've done little band-aid remedies like the DSSFS money, and they've done West Ed money, and they've done lottery money to try to do a little bit, but the bulk, 85% of the funding for schools is that flat grant funding. If you really wanted to change things, you would have to change that money. All these other little pockets of money and little sackfuls. Part of the problem with that is it's small. It's very specific what you can spend it for, and it's you don't get it all the time. It's not regular. So the notion with Leandro is no, we're not going to change the formula on how state fund schools. Now remember, federal money only comes to the 5 federal programs we've talked about: CTE, EC, Title I, gifted, and English as second language. It only comes to those, EC 504. It only comes to those. It comes per kid. Remember, there is no constitutional right to a public education in the United States of America. It is allowed for in the preamble to the Constitution that states may provide. And so the bulk of the funding to actually run schools, hire teachers and run schools comes from the state. And Leandro said, we will not change that basic funding formula. And so what the superintendent is doing, you can't move federal money. It goes with the kids. You can't take it from one and give to another. We're not going to change the state funding, and local is it would have to already been set up that way from the county commissioners, because school boards are not empowered. So all 3 of those, it's illegal on all 3 levels. Now, what are you going to do? And you can talk about why it is, and don't go down the rabbit hole of all the West Ed stuff in the last 10 years. Stick with what the original lawsuit was. All right, the next one that we're looking at here is We Are Normal Too. Now, again, be sure to read Chapter 5, Students' Rights. Answer the 4 questions at the end of the narrative, cite how you address or minimize bullying and cyberbullying. I've got some questions here at the end that you should address in this one. All right, so now what I want you to do, I probably didn't even share that, did I? Let me get that out of the way. Let me share that. I didn't share. Let's see if we'll share this time. Here we go. Let me get that popped up out of the way. What did we do? Here we are. Here we're normal too. So it says right here, answer the 4 questions at the end. Cite how you address or minimize bullying and cyberbullying. There's 4 questions here at the end that you have to answer from this. All right, so please understand, this case study could be about any protected group. These 2 kids happen to be gay, doesn't matter. But this is being revisited again. We've kind of done an about face on some of these things, but the laws are still in place. And so to try to get to the end of this one here is Jimmy and Willie are gay kids. They have done inappropriate displays of affection in school until they've got the community all stirred up. The principal now, where's Valine? This is one where the principal didn't do the right thing, Valine. The principal allowed these kids to get out of control with their behavior to the point where the community's got the torches and the pitchforks out for these 2 gay kids. And so they've now come in and talking to the principal pretty strongly. Got this couple, these parents coming in and they're talking. So here are the things to understand that we could be talking about any protected class of students. Number 2, FERPA laws are being violated. If you know tonight, we had, got a lot of EC stuff from tonight you were supposed to review. What is FERPA law? Anybody know what FERPA law is?
Your right to privacy.
That is correct. That's your federal right to privacy. Mostly it's about exceptional children, but it can be any protected group. So when me and my old lady come strolling into school and we're mad as fire about these kids over here, can you as principal talk to one set of parents about somebody else's child? No. Can you tell them about their punishment? No. So that's the first problem. We got a FERPA problem with this one. Second one is when the principal calls Jimmy and Willie in and says, could y'all quit being gay till you finish school? That'd be real helpful. I'm not making this up. That's exactly what she said. Could you quit being gay for a while till you get through school? Well, that's obviously inappropriate. And part of that too is what's known as heckler's veto. And she follows up by saying, I'm afraid for your safety. What is heckler's veto? You need to make sure you understand that. What that means is the loudest and stupidest shouldn't be able to shout everybody else down. You shouldn't punish me, but take my rights away because you're afraid of what somebody will do to me. So what she's saying is Jimmy and Willie can't go to the prom because I'm afraid what the other students will do to them. Well, you're punishing Jimmy and Willie for somebody else's bad behavior. That's called heckler's veto. So in the end, is what she said to them a veiled threat according to the law? Yeah, it is. It's called under the law of heckler's veto. But what should we do? Can we ban kids from coming to the prom because of their protected class, whether they're EC or whether they're their race or whether their gender or gender identification or their sexual orientation? Can we do that? What rights do they have? Can they come to the prom? Should we cancel the prom? Can we talk to Jerry and his wife about these two kids? What should we have done about Jimmy and Willie's, holding hands and kissing all over the school and got the community all in an uproar? These are the questions that you need to be able to answer from this case. What is the law? Can we ban kids from coming to the prom over their sexual orientation? What is the law here? Make sure you hit all the pieces about FERPA. Make sure you understand heckler's veto. Understand all these things, what the rights are. What has the principal done? This is a case where the principal did about everything wrong. So Belina ought to be happy on this. Questions you have for that one? This one's pretty straightforward. This one is pretty straightforward. And then the fourth of the case studies kind of hits on everything that we'll have done this semester. Let me share my screen. Now, don't get thrown off that this one is set in a foreign country. Doesn't matter. But this one is a monster in terms of make sure you read chapter 7, review the PowerPoint inclusion versus mainstreaming, 6 questions for reflection at the end of the narrative down here at the bottom. Collection right here are the 6 questions you got to answer on this. Got to make sure you do that. Basic education plan law, you understand that every kid gets a basic education. See, this one is going to be different. This is going to be a different kind of case study. This was not mine and Steve's experience. I'll go ahead and tell you that. Our experience, and I'll speak for me, and I think Steve's probably about the same. Our experience was the EC parents were the hinges off the door of my office, always complaining about what they were supposed to get for exceptional children. This case is completely opposite. This is a group of parents coming in who are saying, we're not getting our basic education rights. Our kids are not the EC kids, but because you are accommodating these exceptional children, our kids aren't getting their rights, their basic rights, their Leandro rights. That's why I've got that, what the law says they're getting, because what's going on is in the inclusion model, when they're putting the EC kids in the regular classroom, the teacher, the way she's dealing with it is to have the regular kids, teach the EC kids all day. And they're not getting any instruction at all. The regular ed kids, especially the smarter ones, especially the gifted ones, are not getting any direct instruction. They're just working with the other kids all day, teaching them. And so their parents are mightily upset, and they've stormed the Bastille. Now, again, Valine will be happy. The principal don't know what's going on in their own classrooms, and she sends somebody else to check on. So y'all ought to be eating this one up. Y'all know a little about EC. Some of you know a lot, but y'all know everything about instruction. Y'all ought to be, but this one touches everything. Basic education, due process, instructional technique, exceptional children. This one is a cornucopia of laws and ethical issues and best practices and principal not doing the right thing. This one is just a monster. This one is going to take a while for you to work through all the pieces of it. But what are you going to do? You know, part of the problem is principals don't even know what's going on when the parents come in and complain. She has no clue what the teacher's doing down in the room. And then doesn't bother to go check herself, send somebody else. And so, sound familiar? This would never happen in your school, I'm quite sure. But this is the one that you need. You'll be the expert on this one. You dig into this one, know what's going on, and understand. Now, put it in the context of what your district does in terms of inclusion for exceptional children. All right, that's the case studies. We'll do a little more content next time. Y'all got to talk more. Y'all got to talk more. Y'all making me sleepy. Y'all yawning so much. Y'all got to add more to the discussion. We'll be talking more content next time because we've covered all these things. Next time, I want to talk to us most specifically about the activities that you're doing out at your school. I want to see how that's going. I've seen some really good ones of those, and so be prepared to talk about those 6 weekly activities you have that in discussion board, all the different coming and going, to and fro that I've got you doing. We want to talk about those very specifically next time. Steve, I'll give you the floor. You can do the benediction. I hear Just As I Am playing in the background. Take us home.
Yeah, we're not going to do 6 verses of it though. But I have nothing else to add. That last case study is a rich one, and you'll have fun. But you know, all of them are. And so I did give you a tease though, because Bobby striking out is Dale's favorite. So you do really need to do good on that one too, or he'll just go crazy. You'll hurt his feelings.
I'll throw stuff.
Yeah.
Now remember, we're going to be in person, live and in person.
Yeah, it'll really hurt his feelings. So you want to keep up with that. But in all seriousness, Dale, I don't know how you can tell him to talk more because you didn't shut up enough for you to let him talk. But all that being said, I hope the intent tonight was to lay out what's coming up for all of you. And he certainly dropped some hints for you, especially with the first 2 cases. And so I think you'll have a good time talking about it. But the great part of these 4 cases is that they kind of all touch on different things, and it's all a part of the principal's role. Yes, the superintendent's involved in one of them, but still the school has to work through the superintendent's decision. So it's rightly or wrongly. So it's all a part of it. So it is 7:50 something. I can't see without my glasses, but I think we're close to 8. So with that, everybody, I hope your week is great. It's turning cooler. So everybody's got their heat on a little bit probably tonight. And I hope you have a great night, great week. And we will see you next Tuesday.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
I figured it out, Dr. Lamb.
Did you?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate
All
your
right, everybody have a good evening. Thanks.
Dr. Lamb,
Yes.
really quickly, did I misinterpret